No matter what we do, we're not going to be able to fix this. No! Nobody dies!
I want to go ahead and I want to get to my review for The Flash, one of the many characters in that movie, chat. So many characters have those eyes and have that mouth and just that general dead-eyed expression. I want to talk about that dead-eyed expression, chat. Also, just what led up to this movie being made, the decade-long, 4-decade-long saga, if you go all the way back then, chat. But for those that don't know, The Flash, the 2023 film, which is actually here now, it was released. I can't believe it, chat. It focuses on Barry Allen, who uses his super speed to change the past. But his attempt, pretty much to save his family, his mother, Nora Allen, creates a world without superheroes and metahumans, forcing him to race for his life in order to save the future and all of his new friends. Before going into the film itself, which is I know what you guys are really interested in hearing about, I did want to briefly talk about just the saga. I mean, it really is, chat. The saga of trying to get this movie made. I mean, obviously, all the way back, this movie was this particular version of the film was announced, I want to say in 2013, 2014, chat, so pretty much 10 years ago. Matter of fact, they announced this movie, I want to say, when the original CW Flash series of Grant Gustin came out in 2013, 2014, a decade ago, and now it's finishing up. It's done. Like 9 seasons of TV, chat, well over 100 episodes are complete before this movie was released. Going through so many different drafts, so many writers, so many different executives, the head of Warner Brothers, countless directors before finally settling with Andy Muschietti, who's probably, best known outside, obviously, The Flash right now, directing Mama, I believe, and directing the first 2 It movies. Love Part 1. Not a big fan of Part 2, honestly. But finally settling on him. And of course, everything that's gone on with Ezra Miller, which, I've said for a while. I always thought he was I always thought they were a really odd choice for the character of Barry Allen. Again, another Zack Snyder decision, chat. Where in this version, Barry Allen is this kind of socially awkward, nervous, kind of like ticky, kind of spazzy guy, and that's just not really Barry Allen from the comics or any other adaptations that I've ever seen. It's a great departure, a huge departure from the way the character has been presented in the past. Although that's kind of Zack Snyder's MO. That's what he does. He doesn't really care about the characters or their personalities, more just the iconography, and he reinterprets them in his own way. But that's what we had. We've had Ezra Miller, but even before Ezra Miller, and then of course all the controversies with them and getting into trouble with the law and assaulting people and assaulting women and allegedly doing all these other horrible things. Like, they've been trying to make this Flash movie since the 1980s, chat. Like, after the success of Superman and Superman 2, Warner Bros. Is like, well, we have all these other characters, that are similar to Superman and these amazing powers. And in the early 80s, chat, there were attempts to make a Flash movie, but, that petered out, and they eventually moved on to, kept making Superman movies. Those didn't do well. And then Supergirl, of course, but then kind of reignited interest again thanks to like Batman in 1989. And then, we had all the issues in the 90s with their superhero project. Superman Lives, of course, of Nicolas Cage, And then, there was an attempt to do a Flash film with Ryan Reynolds, who actually would have been perfect for the role, who I think was going to be cast as Wally West, because at that time, Wally West was the Flash. Barry Allen had died in the comics years ago. Wally West was the main Flash. He was the main Flash in the DC animated universe, chat. Voiced by a number of different voice actors. Michael Rosenbaum, famous for playing Lex Luthor in Smallville, voiced him on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. So the character, despite issues trying to get him to live action, has had great adaptations in animation, chat. Some of my favorite Flash movies or some of my favorite Flash content is the animated adaptations. And a decade ago, too, a movie I just reviewed recently, chat, Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox, which was an adaptation of a more recent Flash storyline, the Flashpoint. And I thought that was actually better than the actual comic shit. And, I think that movie's great. And also probably still the best Flash movie to this day. But that's just kind of like my general thoughts on just the attempts to make this movie, the history of it, and everything else, all the various Flash content that we've gotten. We've got a lot of great stuff, and we've gotten some stuff that I don't think has been up to snuff. That I don't think measures up to the greatness and the quality of Barry Allen, the Flash. But we have gotten a lot of really good things, and a lot of things to be appreciative of, Chad. But now I want to go ahead, and I just want to kind of get into my overall general thoughts on the movie before getting into more of the nitty-gritty details, things I liked and I disliked. And I got to say, chat, the lead up to this movie has been absolutely exhausting. Not only because of Ezra Miller, the multiple creative changes behind the scenes for over a decade, it feels like, for this film. And also for it being one of the last dying breaths of the terrible Snyderverse. But also because of just the months. It feels like that people have been talking about this movie, especially for the last 6 months, of talk of how this is not just one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, chat. No. This is the greatest. This is the greatest comic book movie of all time. And listen, as soon as you start saying something like that for months on end, it gets excruciatingly repetitive and almost kind of comical, after a while. It's just like, okay, you're saying these and you can't, the expectations you're setting up are ridiculous, And so I've just become extraordinarily wary of talk like that, And we've heard it before. We've heard it before, Chad. Everyone was saying that about Batman v Superman. It's the greatest comic book movie of all time. It's the best versions of these characters of all time. It got standing ovations at all the test screen. And it's like, come on. You sound ridiculous when you say that. But the thing is, despite all that, Chad, I am a fan of the Flash character. Barry Allen and also especially Wally West. Many of the speedsters, right, in the DC comics and the DCU, right? And going into this, I wanted to be fair. I just didn't want to go in going, all right, well, try to impress me. I was like, you know what? Going to block all that out. Just like, hey, just let me see what you have. You got a lot of baggage, obviously, both within this movie universe and outside of it. Show me what you have, and I think I can judge you very fairly. And the thing is, I'm going to tell you this right at the top. However, I can safely say, after just seeing it like a couple hours ago, like 2 hours ago, chat, this is not the greatest comic book movie of all time, nor is it one of the greatest. Absolutely not. And then that's because of a variety of reasons. But here's the thing. To be positive at the top, there are a number of things that I did like. I even enjoyed, about this movie. Ezra Miller was always the big question mark going into this film, I think, for a lot of people. One, I was never a fan of Ezra Miller's casting as Barry Allen. It just felt so weird. I was like, why? Why Ezra Miller? I mean, not even before everything we knew about Ezra Miller with their mental health issues and criminal record and everything else. It just even before his game, he was a talented actor. He was playing stuff in like Perks of Being a Wallflower, which you mentioned earlier, before this review. There's something wrong with Kevin. Turns out there's something wrong with Ezra. But like the guy has made some great content, but I just never saw him as this character. And so I definitely had that baggage going into this. And then of course everything else that they have been doing. But I have to say, I think this is probably the best Ezra Miller has been as Barry Allen as the Flash. And also, because he's not just playing Barry Allen, he's playing another person. He's playing like a younger version of himself. The plot of this movie, basically, it's kind of like there's a lot of Back to the Future in this film, and it's baked into its DNA. So much so, aesthetically, but so much so that even reference it, which almost felt like unnecessary. You don't even need to say it because you're clearly taking so much from Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future. But, in any case, they, in this case, the plural works because there's two of them, which is so funny. They are, I think, for the most part, really entertaining. They do a great job of humanizing the character, especially when it comes to pairing Ezra Miller with his parents in this film. Marabek, is that how you say her name? Marabek Verdue, who plays Nora Allen, and Ron Livingston, who plays, obviously Barry's father. Like, some of the best moments in the film, some of those heartfelt moments with the Barrys are with their family. That's when I feel like the movie's being its most honest and earnest. And I was like, I can feel the love coming across there. Like, how they handle a lot of those scenes, I think is the best. Some of the best content within the movie itself. The dynamic between the two Barrys, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes it's like it's really funny and I'm really liking it. And sometimes it's just too extra. It's like that's the thing about Barry Allen. Ezra Miller's taking Barry Allen. This character just feels so over the top and so extra and like never shuts up. And they say like, well, that's part of the thing. It's a character flaw. But I'm like, I just kind of want to just like shut the fuck up, please. Slow down, Barry. Just please slow down and shut up and just listen. And, that Barry has to do that constantly with the younger version of himself who's talking even more and who's even more obnoxious. But it does make sense in the context of the film with him being younger, being in college, not knowing about the world and being thrust into this superhero, fantastical, supernatural event. But again, sometimes that dynamic works, and sometimes I kind of found it annoying. But it was some of the best parts of the movie. And I did like that, but it didn't always hit. Sometimes it did fall flat or they go too far. It's like, why did you keep going? You ruined the joke. You ruined the joke, and it wasn't necessary. But Ezra Miller is definitely the best he's ever been in these movies here, I would say. Michael Keaton as Batman, people who were saying, we were all joking, Chad, the new Batman movie with the Flash, guest starring the Flash, his tertiary character. This is very much the Flash's film. Like, we don't even get to Batman other than, like, Ben Affleck, who I will mention in just a bit. We really don't get to Michael Keaton's Batman until I would say, like, well over an hour into the movie. Like, it's quite a while. This is already a pretty long film. This is over, I think, 2.5 hours long. I think it's like 235, 240 or something like that. And it takes a while before we get to Michael Keaton as Batman. And in terms of his performance, I think he's very good. He's very solid. It feels like he hasn't lost a step playing that character like he did in '89 and Returns. Again, this is outside of his performance, but we get to see his Batman in such a way where we never saw it in the original two Burton films. Where Batman in those movies moved awkwardly around. They didn't have the special effects, the CGI for those films to make him move how he moves in this movie. It's kind of awkward, and he couldn't move his head. And he can move his head in this movie, Jake. He can move his head really well, which is great. But to see his Batman in that way, just moving, and again, that's where some of the best CGI in the movie is used, because it's all in darkness, and how he moves in the environment is great. I really like that. If I have any complaints, I would have liked to have spent more time with him, because I think that's a big issue with this movie. Despite, like, I feel like the pacing's definitely off. There are moments where I feel like, okay, we can kind of move along, but there's other moments where I feel like they're moving too fast, especially when they're like, all right, well, listen, we got to kind of explain the plot and everything that's going on with my powers and the arrival of the Kryptonians. There's a lot going on in this movie, and a lot of that doesn't feel like it's all baked thoroughly. And like how Michael Keaton's Batman is thrown into this movie, it just feels like, okay, he's on, he's there, even when he says he's not going to be, but he's there. It's just like, I would have liked to have learned more about his history in this world, because he's not. I mean, I don't think this is a spoiler to say. I mean, they're like, oh yeah, this is Tim Burton's Batman, but I'm like, is it Tim Burton's Batman though? Or this is like a variant of Tim Burton's Batman? Because I would have liked to have spent some time, like, okay, learning like what happened. In those 30 years after Batman Returns, like, because we see like Wayne Manor, it's completely, it's falling apart. There's debris everywhere. Bruce Wayne, he's a recluse. He almost kind of has like a bit of a Howard Hughes vibe to me. It was coming off of that. He's just like, he lives like a hobo now. And I'm like, something happened to him. Like something like really terrible happened to him to make him this way. but they never really go into as to why. They kind of only have one line of dialogue where it's like, well, they didn't need me anymore, and Gotham is now one of the safest cities in the world. I'm just like, well, how did that happen? You know? And so much of the film is just him kind of explaining time travel and multiverse and him talking as the Barrys about that. And I'm just like, let's just take a moment to like find out like what happened to this person. And they don't do that. So for everyone that was interested and see like, whoa, well, do they reference like the rest of his career? It's like, did his various adventures like affect him physically, you know, emotionally? None of that's there. We'll get to it. There's a lot of Easter eggs with him, and some stuff they just literally just pull out of the back of the Batmobile. Like, hey, remember this thing from one of the Burton movies? I'm just like, yeah, but it's kind of weird that's there. It's just kind of used for a joke. I'm just like, there's so much history with this character that is so thoroughly unexplored, and you could have definitely spent some of that time doing that in this movie, where we kind of get a sense of like why he is the way he is now, and they don't do that. That is just not in the movie at all. It's just like, all right, kids, I'll help you feed Zod or whatever and find this Superman. Sure, that's what it is. We got to get to do all this stuff. We got to go to point A to point B so we can finally get to point C to get to the big action scene. And it was just like, God, let's have these guys like have a conversation that's just not about time travel, multiverse, mumbo jumbo. But they just don't do that. But other than that, Michael Keaton is a fine addition to this movie, and they do some great things with him, just some really cool action sequences I feel like we always dreamed of. In our heads when we first saw the Burton movies, it was just like, this is what we always thought we saw when we saw these movies. And as adults, we were like, oh, it's kind of goofy how he moves around now in the suit. But like what they do with him visually is really, really cool. I did like that quite a bit. It's just there's a lot of character moments I felt like they missed with him. And I know it's not his movie, but you could have spent some time in that. We could have gotten an explanation. They just don't explain it. They just don't. There's no Penguin references at all. Everyone's like, what about the Penguin Army? Nope, that's not in the movie. Don't worry. That I'll spoil. Nope, no penguins mentioned. He's like, listen, kid, I've seen some crazy shit. I've seen a crazy clown guy. I've seen a mutated penguin man with a shirt. I fought an army of penguins. They almost destroyed the entire city. They don't mention that. Would give it kind of funny, but they don't. They don't. And then, as I always brought up, Chad, in terms of the other supporting characters, Mara Beck-Verdue and Ron Livingston, even though they're not in the movie a lot, at least the scenes that they are given, they are impactful, and they are like the big emotional beats of the movie. Because you know Nora Allen, of course, she was murdered. Her husband was blamed for this, and he's been in prison for years, probably like, well, what 12, 15 years, something like that. And that's what, causes Barry to pursue a career as in CSI, right? And how they handle all that in the movie, for the most part, I think is handled very well. And there's some quite touching scenes, right? They kind of even bookend a lot of the stuff with Barry and his mom towards the end. And I did like that quite a bit, listen, there's also just some other genuine moments of great drama, in the film. There's some scenes that, even though I feel like they didn't really use these characters very well because they just didn't give them any time, there's one scene that really stood out to me. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, where it was between Zod and Supergirl, Kara Zor-El. And I was just like, there's this whole exchange between them, and it revolves around Kal-El. And I kind of liked that conversation. I was like, ooh, let's get into this more. I thought that was actually really cool, but they didn't know, because then they start fighting. It's like, God damn it. And so I was like, oh, that was a good moment. Also, this film, I think, does have a terrific score. And everyone's comparing this Back to the Future, as they should, because this score is eerily reminiscent of Back to the Future's score. It's very whimsical, It's not like a lot of the DCEU scores, which has always been I've had a lot of issues with the DCEU music. You like Wonder Woman, that it's like, oh, what's the electric guitar? It's like, no, and Batman's just like a cacophony of loud, bah, 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 bah. It's like, what am I even listening to? I just really never cared for a lot of the script. But The Flash is the one where it's like, okay, this feels like a blockbuster, John Williams-esque like score. You know, it's like this is cool. I really liked a lot of the orchestral music in this movie. It served the film well, and it added to the kind of bombacity of a lot of these big scenes. They do use some other music in the movie for the soundtrack, and I've had some issues with soundtracks recently, chat. Last one was for Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, and where they have all this 90s hip hop in there. I'm just like, this just doesn't fit. I know it takes place in the 90s, I know, but it's like when you're putting in these songs in a moment where it's like, oh, it's supposed to be like something that's like huge, or return of a character, or this very, dramatic moment, and I think it just kind of undercut it with some rap music. I'm like, this isn't working. That could be used in other places. It's like, look at how Spider-Verse, which does use a lot of different types of music, does use hip hop, does use rap, but how they use it, it just fits, right? They just knew the tone that they wanted to hit with this particular scene. That's why they use that music here. It's like Rise of the Beast had that issue where they're using music that just doesn't fit the scene, the dramatic scene itself, and Flash does it too. Like, you get tonal whiplash in this movie. There are scenes there'll be like a moment where it's like, wow, it was really dramatic, and then we cut to like a pop song, and it's like, wait, what? What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. And then we'll go to the Danny Elfman score like right afterwards. It's like, guys, this is just a hodgepodge of too much. You're all contradicting each other. It's just weird. And I didn't like that. But the score of the movie is quite good. I really enjoyed it. And listen, I know I've already been getting kind of negative about this film already, but I did want to highlight the positives first. But I got to tell you, chat, this film has some of the worst CGI and special effects that I've ever seen in a blockbuster, at least in a very long time. I can't tell you the last time I saw something like, wow, this CGI. Like, everyone's been complaining, like, oh, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania CGI was so bad. I'm just like, not compared to this. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania CGI is stupendous compared to the CGI in this movie. So many films, like, people saying, like, No Way Home had terrible CGI. It's like, I'm sorry, I vehemently disagree. Like, anyone that was complaining about the CGI in those movies or any blockbuster this year that's come out, and if they don't say nothing about this, then yeah, you are full of BS, because the CGI in this film and so many of the special effects is not just one. It's not just like one scene where it's weird. It's countless scenes. It's multiple scenes where you have characters, I'm telling you, chat, that look like this on a consistent basis. Babies, adults, men, women, everybody has a face like that at some point in the movie, multiple times in the movie itself. So many of the CGI models and faces are bizarre, ugly, and just reek of the uncanny valley. I was like, what is going on? Scenes that sound good, like on paper. It's like, oh, it's like, I'll tell you right now, scenes that are like, they're written like, oh, this could be a fun sequence. They're just not well executed. They're not in any capacity. I just cannot imagine why they released this film with so many unfinished VFX shots. And, the film opens up with this, all that stuff you see in the beginning with like Ezra running up a building and Ben Affleck's Batman, who is in the movie. Actually, I want to mention him briefly. I forgot. That's all that in the trailers, like in the first 15, 20 minutes of the film. There's like a whole action sequence that revolves around the Flash saving babies, and it is awful. The babies are just so creepy and weird, and the choreography for that scene is odd, and it's like you just see the babies are just like dead-eyed. There's like no emotion, there's no light in them. But even all the adult characters too, like the regular human beings, it's like, why does it look this way? It is so bizarre. And then there'll be other scenes where like we go to like the Speed Force, I don't know how to describe it, like the nexus of the Speed Force, I guess, chat. And we see these glimpses of the past, but they're repetitive. And these character models, the CGI, it's just like, how is this allowed in the theater? I can't believe it. It's laughably bad. It's laughably bad. And the thing that's crazy about all this, and it's not just like people saying, oh, well, that's how it looks like to the Flash. It's like, no. Because we see other scenes where the Flash isn't moving fast at all, where he's in the real world, not in the nexus of the Speed Force, where people look that way constantly in the movie. And it's like, why is this the way this is? And so I didn't know about this. Apparently, Andy Muschietti, who's the director of the movie, he has come out and apparently said that, it's meant to look that way. I had no idea. So thank you, was it Chris Ayres and Deadpool, for sending this my way. And I was going to read this briefly. This is part of the review, though. The Flash visual effects are meant to look that way. Director Andy Muschietti told IO9 with the Disney Universe film can at times look weird. Oh, it looks very weird. Let's see here. Where's his quote? Talk about the babies, but they go in the details about this. It's kind of, no, we used all real babies. You couldn't tell. Barbara joke, but then Andy gave us the real answer. The idea of course, so this is, I guess, his explanation for things. The idea, of course, is we are in the perspective of the Flash. He said, everything is distorted in terms of light and textures. There is no texture. Everything's smooth. We enter this water world. That is a weird way to describe the Speed Force, which is basically being in Barry's POV. It was part of the design, so it looks a little weird to you. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. I don't believe that for a second. These effects are not done. And the thing is, chat, that it's no excuse. It's no excuse. This movie took fucking a decade to make. 40 years, you want to go all the way back. You want to be a stickler. But let's just say it took a decade to make. You had probably, they say this budget's $200 million. I don't think it's 200. I think it's $300 million because all the reshoots and everything else. And this is what it looks like? No, absolutely not. Like, didn't Avengers Infinity War or Endgame, they cost like $300 million each? And look at the effects in those, the CGI in those. You don't get Babyface. You don't get fucking Scorpion King. Like, that's what it reminds me of. I just realized, Chad, the CGI in this movie, the faces look just like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson from The Mummy Returns, from that sequel to the original. Like, that's what they all look like. And I was like, holy shit! It's like they took that character model and they just shrunk the Dwayne down and they made him into a white little baby. That's what they do for all the other characters. It's weird. Like we see. There are cameos of multiple other characters, chap. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but like they're all weird, dead-eyed CGI faces. And it's like, this just does not look good. And sometimes it's like, wait, who is that supposed to be this person? Is that supposed to be him? Is that supposed to be her? But because it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, visually, I'm guessing because of the outfit they're wearing that's them. But based on how the faces look, it's like, no, it is ugly. And it is by far some of the worst, again, CGI that I've seen in a theatrically released film since, I can't tell you. I don't know when the last CGI movie I saw where I thought the effects were so bad. But this one is like the cream of the crop. This is at the top of that shit Sunday chat. It's awful. It's also, as I said, way too long. It's just so weird because there are moments when I feel like it's moving so fast because this is the Flash. But then there's other moments where it's like, can we slow down and kind of like talk about this or talk about this character or build this character up? And they don't. It's like, we got to rush through it. And so it's so weird. It's like kind of the stuff they want to talk about, which is all the fucking time travel nonsense and explains like, I get it. But we always have to have the same conversation over and over again. And I just got kind of bored by it. It's like, okay, can we move on? Can we talk about something that's more interesting? And I think this film, like, listen, I know a lot of people have been sick of multiverse and for a variety of reasons, but this movie's use of the multiverse, I think is the worst. It's the worst use of the multiverse concept yet. You know, in terms of like either a DC or Marvel movie or superhero film in general. Most of it, Chad, is just for Easter eggs and cameos that kind of come out of nowhere. Like, there's like, there's that, and there's this, and here's that, and there's that, and it's like, but they don't really have any relevance to, like, what goes on in the story. And so it's just kind of like literally a clip show. Even how they show off other worlds, it's like a spinning globe with reels of film, like, around it. That's the only way I can describe it, Chad. It's like a globe with reels of film. Right, and here's this world from this movie series, and here's this world from this movie series, but they all have the weird CGI face, right? The Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson got shrunk down to a white baby face. That's what I'm gonna coin it, chat. That's the Andy Muschietti way, and I didn't like that. Really didn't like that. And I hate to be, negative, 'cause I know a lot of people are excited for it, but Sasha Calle, who plays Supergirl, she's barely used in the movie. And there's little interesting things about her. It's like, I understand why she's mad for a reason. She says, in the movie, she did not grow up in Kansas, chat. She did not have that same treatment. Although she probably wouldn't have ended up the same, because the Kents were just as evil as the Soviets were, I suppose. Or the Russians were. Like, maybe you should have let him drown, Clark. Fuck him. Who cares? So probably the same, which is so funny. It's like, see, if she was raised by the Clarks, she would have, or by the Kents, that she would have had a totally different perspective. It's like, I think she probably would have had the same perspective no matter what. But in any case, I understand why she's mad and why she has this, dour attitude, because in the movie, instead of landing in Kansas, she ends up being captured by the Russians, right? And of course, the Russians are going to experiment her, etc. But that whole storyline, which it's so funny, because so much of the movie is dedicated to we got to get Superman, we got to get him, and then when they finally get not Superman but Supergirl. It's just kind of, that's the point in the movie where it's, okay, we're going way too fast. We're going way too fast to this. But it's like, all right, I'm going to help you. Why? Because, I saw Zod doing some bad stuff, and you guys seem like you need some help, so I'll help you. They just don't do anything worth it, really. And, she has a couple of, she has one dramatic moment that stood out to me between her and Zod, which is like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Let's spend more time with this. And they just don't, because then when they start fighting, boom, 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 punch, punch, punch. I was like, I would have liked to have seen more of that, because I think that would have been interesting. But there's just not enough material for her to even warrant her presence. It just feels like we need a superhero. We need a very overpowered superhero just for the big final third act. I'm to the point where it's like, maybe you should have just had Henry Cavill come back one more time for this role. And they would have gone more closer to the original Flashpoint storyline, because in that storyline, chat, I forget, I know it's not the Russians, but I think it's, the government captures him after he crash lands in Metropolis, and they experiment on him, and he's basically Schmeagol, he's basically like Gollum, just so maybe that would have been better. He's just this even more broken version of this already broken Superman that we've gotten in the Zack Snyder verse. I think that's why not? But yeah, they don't do anything with her, really. Her performance is just I hate you, I'll help you. That's it. That's it. And she has a good reaction, though, when she meets Zod. And they do talk about something in regards to Krypton and Kal-El. I was like, that's pretty cool. But again, they don't really captivate on it. And yeah, chat, the final act of this movie is just a cacophony of lazy and disturbing CGI with endless cameos that pretty much come to nothing. It really just feels like a poor man's version of the Flashpoint paradox. And the animated film, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It is infinitely better than the live action film in every conceivable way. It just is. Just the way in which he plays the multiverse and different timelines and time travel and really different versions of characters, and actually gives them something to do, at least the main players. And it's like, this is really interesting and cool. This one, it's like, these are good ideas. There's some good ideas here. These are that was a good dramatic moment. That was a funny comedic bit, but there's just so much in between that just doesn't do a great job of providing that connective tissue. And so it just kind of, for me, it's a really unsatisfying watch, honestly. And it's frustrating because of just I go back to it, chat, the 10-year, 20-year, 40-year saga of trying to make this film. It's the same thing I've been saying. I've said a lot of DCEU movies. I'm like, this is the best you can do? This? I said that for Batman. The first time we get to see Batman and Superman theatrically, live action on screen, Batman, that's the best that you can do. Justice League, whichever version of Justice League, I don't care if it's the Whedon version or the Zack Snyder version. It's like, this is the best version of these characters, the live action version you can do of these characters. Finally seeing the Justice League in theaters for the first time ever, or in this 4-hour gratuitous bloated cut. This is this. It's frustrating. It's extraordinarily frustrating, and some people say oh, Chris, you hate DC. It's like, no, I fucking don't. I love DC. I grew up with DC. DC was my first exposure to superheroes, the concept, Batman. The animated series was my first exposure to this, and so I love these characters. I always have a personal connection to them. I want to see them represented in a great way. I want to see them done well. It's when I don't see them done well, it's frustrating, it's disappointing. And this movie has good ideas. It has some good stuff in it, but there's a lot that, I'm sorry, just does not work. And so it just going back like all those months, everyone, all these, I don't know if it's critics, I mean, or these first time viewers or something saying like this is the greatest comic movie of all time. It's like, no, it's not. I think that is just so ridiculous. I don't get it. I don't get it. But hey, you know, you like the movie, that's totally fine. You know, we all, it's subjective, of course, but for me, I did expect more. I thought, okay, let's see what you have. And I can point to the things I did enjoy, that I did like, and I can easily point to the things that frustrated me or I thought was terrible. And the CGI in this movie is indeed terrible. I don't care what Andy Muschietti says. He's lying. I'm sorry. He's a liar. And it makes me even more concerned now because apparently James Gunn has handpicked him to direct the Batman movie. And the Batman, the Brave and the Bold, his Batman movie. I don't know. There's so many different Batman films out now. But it's separate from the Matt Reeves Batman, which I am looking forward to. I really like that first movie quite a bit. Can't wait for the sequel. But like he's doing Batman, Brave and the Bold. And I think I can only base that maybe on around, you know what? Another positive thing I could say, Ben Affleck was I think for the most part good in the movie. Actually, no, Ben Affleck actually was great in the movie. You know, especially I think he said it himself. He's like, I feel like I finally understand this character. He's like, yeah, I think so too. Like he's more of a mentor to Bear, and he's telling him just like, don't do this, don't fuck it up. And I actually like those scenes with him in the movie, and he's not a Batman that's constantly murdering people, which is like, that's nice. That's nice that he's changed. There are, but again, go back to the CGI, Chad. There are shots where we see in the trailers, like him moving around the city in broad daylight. It just looks weird. It's just like he's too smooth. It's like there's no texture to anybody in this movie. Like during these CGI sequences, and they do a lot of crazy over the top CGI sequences with Ben Affleck's Batman and Michael Keaton's. But at least with Michael Keaton, like they hide a lot of him in the dark, and so it actually looks really good. And I was like, oh, I don't mind this at all. But then they have the ones of Ben Affleck where it's in daylight. I'm just like, this looks fucking weird. And I'm just like, I don't really like this. But with him as Bruce Wayne. And like just him talking as a normal, you know, person and not given dialogue, you know, like, how do you know that name? He's like, do you bleed? You will. Like none of that Zack Snyder dialogue is in this. Thank God. Well, some of it is. I should say that. But in regards to his Batman, none of that is there. But he actually was good. I was like, and the thing is, it's so sad, chap, because in another world, another universe, you could have done a great Ben Affleck Batman movie. I still have said you could have done a great Dark Knight Returns with him as that Batman, but that's like a separate film series. It's just like, hey, just do that movie or however many you want to do, just with him, and boom, you're good, right? But don't connect it to all these other things, you know. And that would never make any sense to me. That was always weird. Again, another brilliant Zack Snyder decision. But yeah, but back to the film itself. Yeah, it's outside of, you know, a couple of good things, chat, you know, which I did like about the movie. It's kind of a frustrating mess. It's kind of a frustrating mess of a film, and it is the last, I guess, dying breath or whimper, if you will, of the DCEU. Which is like, wow, this is it. Really? This is what's gonna set everything. And, oh, by the way, they doesn't set anything up to people are like, oh, this is gonna be like a reboot to the DC. This is gonna lead into James Gunn's DCU. I don't think it does. Like, there's nothing in this movie that indicates like, all right, here we go. Here's like now clean slate. It's like, nope. If anything, it's even how they end it. It's kind of like it's more confusing than ever. And also, I think like the final ending scene, rebirth. Not even really a rebirth. No, it'd been funny actually if they called it this Flash Rebirth, based on the comic. But even like the final ending scene is more of like a cameo Easter egg joke. And apparently there's a stinger at the end of the movie. I didn't stay to see it, so I have no idea how that ends. But worst end credit stinger ever. There you go. So. I didn't even see what it was. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who wants to see it, but not surprised. I just didn't. It's a hot spaghetti mess. As Michael Keaton said, Chad, in the movie, as hobo Michael Keaton once said, it's a hot spaghetti mess. So yeah, Chad, for me, I don't know. Give this a rating. A rental, I guess. I guess it's a solid rental. I don't feel the need to ever. Well, the only way I would ever watch this movie again is for content creation purposes. Like, I'll do a spoiler review for it one day. I'll do like a audio video commentary for it one day, but I don't have the desire to go back and watch this. And the thing is, like, there have been, like, good DCEU movies. There have been great, like, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, I think, to me, is by far the best of the DCEU movies, you know? That one I happily rewatch all the time. That movie's great. You know, Shazam. I like Shazam. People have been saying, like, is this worse than... I like Shazam Fear of the Gods. Shazam Fear of the Gods had some issues, but people who are saying, like, oh, Shazam Fear of the Gods is one of the worst movies this year, I'm fucking sorry. Shazam Fear of the Gods is much better than this movie. That's why everyone's saying is, like, oh, this is one of the greatest comics. Like, what are you talking about? And, like, Shazam Fear of the Gods is better than it. So, I don't know. But there have been good DCU movies. The first Wonder Woman. I don't like the third act, but the first 2/3 I think are great, are solid. You know, and there's some others I can maybe pick out. I don't know. I have to go through it again. But this is definitely not one of the better ones in my opinion. This is like more, I guess, middle of the road, I suppose, of the DCEU outings, chap. But yeah, a couple good moments in it. Some endearing moments, earnest moments. Ezra Miller, I think for the most part, they were good. Maybe a little, they were a little too extra. Michael Keaton, again, I feel like you could have done more with him. But I still enjoyed his presence in the film. And obviously the actors who played Barry's parents, Maribek Verdú and Ron Livingston, they were quite good in the film. Really liked them. But yeah, Chad, mixed bag. And I give it a rental. What about you guys? What did you think of The Flash? Is it the greatest comic movie of all time, like some people have been saying? Or did you find it to be kind of disappointing, like I did? Let me know, chat. Just stare into the eyes of the baby. Stare into its cold, dead eyes. There you go, chat. Calling me Hazel. Welcome to stream. Also, I'm going to answer your questions. I have a question. But I saw some people that were donating during the review. Let me go ahead and give you a shout out now because I did see you. And thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, Link Dark W for the follow. Appreciate that. Batboy, thank you. So crashing through your Flash. Batboy, thank you for crashing through my Flash review. 22 months. Thank you so much. Glee, thank you for the 100 biddies. And Austin, thank you for the 100 biddies. Does Zod say Neil before Zod? No, he does not. Oh, that's the other thing. They don't do anything with Zod. Like, I guess Michael Keaton. I could even mention in my review. Michael Shannon. Jesus. Michael Shannon, like, literally came out, like, out of the movie. Like, didn't he say, like, a couple of years ago, he's like, I didn't like doing this movie. I found it very unfulfilling. And listen, to be honest, chat, yeah, I kind of got that sense because he's just in a big CGI suit for so much of it in a desert. Oh, that's the other thing, too. The third act, most of the third act takes place in a desert in this movie. And it's just, again, that's just a cacophony of CGI. I just kind of found that dull. It's like, can we not do superhero battles in the desert? Can we just do them someplace else? I'm not saying, like, you always have to have them in the middle of the city where they kill everybody. But it's just, like, just a flat desert? Really? It's like, okay. You know, we can do a little bit more. But, yeah, I think he came out, like, Michael Shannon came out and said, like, yeah, I hated doing this. And if you watch his performance, like, he just, like, whatever. He's like, okay, I'm here. I showed up. He seems so tired in the film. So, although I like his one moment he had with Sasha Calle, chat, you know, when they're talking about, again, I don't want to go into spoilers, but they do bring up Kal-El. I thought, oh, this is interesting. But then they don't really do it. They don't really do much of it afterwards. They're just hitting each other. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.